because we was at a party, like we drunk as hell. To be transparent, like that was at the time when I was drinking and smoking a lot. Like I was toe up. For her to be toe up and tell me that in the middle of a party, mind you, the music loud than a mug. So like once she told me that, I was like, okay, like I kind of it just stuck with me because it's just like you told me this in the midst of you kind of just being out your element. So I knew it had to be burning in you to say that to me. So after I kind of just got my mind cleared, I was like, she's very right. She's definitely this is definitely important. And when I watch different videos on people telling people to start up their brands and stuff like that, it's an overarching theme about purpose and intention. So
for sure,
I definitely learned a lot from that experience.
For sure.
We gon' chance it, run that shit, don't panic. We gon' chance it, run that shit, don't panic. We gon' chance it, run that shit, don't panic. We gon' chance it, run that shit, don't panic.
Kinfolk, what is good? It's your girl Ken, and I welcome you again to the Keys and Seeds podcast. And if you're tuning in visually, you already know that this is a special episode because I have a guest with me, and I'm super excited for this episode in particular and to have a conversation with this guest because this guest is a creative such as myself. He's a music artist. He's an entrepreneur. He's also a brother in the faith, and he's also a friend of mine. And we've been friends for how long it's been, bro?
I started making music like
we started making music at the same time, 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
So like 7 years.
Yeah,
we've been friends for a minute.
That's a long time, bro.
Yeah, it's been a minute, and I haven't had many conversations with people on the pod. I'm also in a different space with the pod since I've relaunched it, and this is something that we've already discussed, of course. But yeah, so everything with the pod is intentional. This is a intentional conversation, an intentionally chosen guest for this episode. And the conversation for this episode is going to be around artist development. And this is someone who I've been able to watch as a friend, as a peer in music, develop in the way that he's developed as an artist. And we're both very opinionated people.
I'm too opinionated sometimes.
And so I'm looking forward to having a conversation with him specifically about artist development, and not only developing as an artist, but how that development is influenced by our development as individuals, both spiritually and emotionally. And I feel like that's a piece that's missing in a lot of our conversations.
For sure.
Around artist development. So if that's something that you're interested in, make sure you stick around. And yeah, so as I said, this is a friend of mine, a music artist, entrepreneur, CEO of the brand God's Child. You see it on the shirt. You see it on my necklace. But yeah, you want to introduce yourself to the people more than I already have so they can know a little bit more of who you are?
Hey, how y'all doing? If you didn't know who I am, I go by the name King Dierre, aka God's Child. I'm a artist, entrepreneur, and a on the rise journalist. So yeah, I got a lot of different facets and mediums that I'm in. So yeah, I'm happy to be here, honestly.
Did you mention where you go to school?
Oh yeah, I'm currently attending Jackson State University. Shout out to the I Love.
For sure. That's a title I forgot to mention. Educated black man. So yeah.
I'm trying.
So yeah, you currently have a deck of cards in your hand. Mm-hmm. These are just different open-ended reflections.
Did you want me to answer like a specific amount of cards, or it didn't really matter?
We can just start with one. Okay. Just whichever one you feel led to. And this is the first guest I've used these cards with, so I'm looking forward to seeing where this first question, icebreaker question, goes.
Oh, I like.
And we
this
both can answer it too.
It says, when do you feel most alive? That's crazy. Not to even sound like cliche, but when I am writing music, that's probably like the most time I'm centered and can focus in on something.
Yeah.
When most people don't ever see my actual writing process, I look like a madman. I be in my room pacing around and like mouthing what I'm saying, and that's probably the most I feel alive. Like it's really fun to me to try to put into words how I'm feeling and what I want to say. So yeah, definitely.
When you first read the question, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I feel like we about to have the same answer.
Yeah.
I feel the most alive when I'm creating too, as an artist. As many of you know, before starting this podcast, I expressed myself through music, and so that's how a lot of people currently know me. And with this podcast, I'm hoping that people get to know a little bit more about me, as well as the people who I'm inspired by and I have close relationships with, such as Dierre.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, did I even say your name?
Nah, you good. I knew you was gonna wait till like you got the whole spiel out.
So this is Dierre, everybody. King Dierre, as an artist. But I would say I feel more alive when I'm creating music, because we're all creatives. We're all able to create in some capacity. I think a lot of people don't consider themselves as creatives, but we are created by the creator, right?
Of course.
But for those of us that identify as creatives, of course, we feel the most alive when we're creating.
For sure.
But I would say too, as I'm growing closer to God, I feel also more alive when I'm receiving greater revelation of who God is and who I am and where God has me. So I would say I feel alive too when things like start clicking for me spiritually. Like when you really like tap in and like growing, like that's what makes me feel alive too. Like we here with it.
And then getting confirmations through other people, like hearing other people tell you like, dang, you grown so much, or
for sure,
I've seen how much you've changed, or oh, I'm surprised you didn't say this, or you know, it shows in the people that that you're around, because at the end of the day, like we can't see ourselves until we look in the mirror, and a lot of people serve as our mirror. So it's for definitely dope to hear other people tell you like, I'm just proud how much you've grown as a person. So
for sure,
definitely
for sure. So using that as the segue into our conversation, would you say that the people who you have in your life right now, like, are the people, of course, like as we grow and we mature too, right? Like we meet new people and we become aligned with, you know, new people that are more aligned with who we're growing into, right?
For sure.
But would you say you currently have people in your life that's been able to see like the growth and maturity over the years?
Definitely. My family is like my core, like my rock when it comes to just me going through stuff, especially with me being the only one out of my family to move so far from home. I've really had to go through a lot of different things by myself, and sometimes you'll feel like since they're so far that they're not close to you, and just having people like my mom and my sisters and just everybody in my immediate family just be close to me and around me to let me know that everything is okay, and that they support me all the way. It's really I'm just grateful overall to have them in my life.
For sure.
And other people, of course, like my good friends and close friends. So yeah, for sure.
I know I can like speak for myself and say what I'm about to say next, but I do want to ask you too. Would you say like those confirmations of you growing and maturing and being in alignment, would you say like those compliments hit more when it's coming from those people who have seen you?
Yeah, definitely.
Over the years versus new people who are like inserting themselves on the journey at different points?
It sometimes it depends, because with me moving from a different state, and living in Mississippi for about 4 years now, sometimes hearing stuff from them hits different, because coming into college, I was a very different person, and they only knew me from how I met them initially.
Exactly.
So hearing them tell me that sometimes kind of hits. But I feel like it's equally the same. It just depends on the context to what they're talking about. If they just talk about my overall achievements or what I'm accomplishing when it comes to just music or my brand and all that different type of stuff, sometimes it hits a lot more with people back home. Like I got people back in high school that I grew up with, and they'll be like, dang bro, I'm so proud of you, and like hearing that, I'll be like, dang, because they've seen me since before I even came up with this when I had my old brand. But like seeing people in college talk about just my own personality, how my emotions, my emotional state, my behavior, and all that different type of stuff, sometimes it hits different because they've witnessed me develop over time. Because when you're in college, you grow so much naturally. For sure. In those 4 years.
For sure. And I'm glad you said that too with mentioning your old brand, because the next question I want to ask is, did you go into college already knowing like what you wanted for yourself? And so like for the people who don't know you, like did you go into college already an artist, or did you go to college and find yourself and realize that that's what you wanted to do? Because I know for me personally, music wasn't something that I got into until I got to college. Mm-hmm. Like I was writing, of course, before then. Before it was music, it was poetry. I've always been a writer.
Yeah.
But college for me was that time for me to discover more of who I am, and I came more into my own. But then sometimes too, you get people who go to college and they know exactly what they want to do, and they just hit the ground running. So what was that for you?
For me, like I've always, kind of like what you say, I've always been a writer.
Yeah.
In 7th grade, that's how I got into poetry and writing. And when I got into high school, specifically my sophomore and junior year, that's when I invested in myself and wanted to become an actual artist.
Yeah.
That's why when I met you, I was so young. But for me in that time frame, I was just learning everything. So once I transitioned into college, I took a break from music. I wanted to take a break because of all what I was going through, and I didn't really know if me being an artist was something that was for me anymore. But with me having that hiatus and that break, I still wanted to have my, like, the idea of me branding myself, because I had the momentum of me having my old brand always.
Right.
And with me having that old brand, I knew I wanted something new and different.
Yeah.
And I think all of what I went through my freshman year was just the perfect transition of me being like, okay, well, since you went through all these trials and tribulations, you got to be, there's no other way that you overcame this but being a child of God. So I wanted to stamp that and make that an actual name brand, because I knew people could relate to it. And from there, it just kind of got to where it is now, to where a lot of people are supporting it and really buy into the ideology and the reasoning and the meaning behind everything. So I think, to answer your question, it's kind of both. Like, yeah. I knew I wanted to be an artist, but I just wanted to take a break at the time. And slowly but surely, I got back into it by being influenced by other people that I met in college and back at home. So yeah.
Got you. So can you expand on how your brand evolved from Always to what it is now? Because that's artist development too. So for the people who don't know what the Always brand was or is, so, I have an Always hoodie. Yeah. I didn't want to wear it today because I know it's the old brand. You know,
it's still tripping me out.
I'm waiting for the new drop that I ordered to come in the mail.
That's funny because they get here like the 25th, so it's coming soon.
Type.
The Always brand, it's still close to my heart because at the end of the day, people loved it. And
for the people who don't know what it is, what is Always? What was Always?
The concept behind it was just kind of a phrase that I would say. I would end all my conversations with just always, like, basically just meaning that whatever I'm investing to, whatever I'm in support of, I'm always gonna do it. I remember I had it really sparked from a convo with my mama. My mama was like, pray for me. And I was like, always. And that's kind of how I started keeping that phrase as a normal thing I would say to people. I would just put always with a period at the end, just to let people know it's like a confirmation of how I feel and me meaning what I say. And a lot of people liked it, and the only reason why I wanted to change it is because it was simple in its meaning. It was still powerful in I guess the purpose of it, but I knew that I could do something a lot bigger and greater.
For sure.
So once I came up with God's Child, it kind of just was like, all right, I finally got what I really wanted to be as the main brand. So yeah.
Got you. So how did the brand God's Child come about exactly? Like, what was that transition from Always to God's Child?
Well, I mentioned before I was coming from Indy and heading to Mississippi, and me getting into the situation I got into in Mississippi. Basically, we suffered a severe winter snowstorm, and that put me in a real low place in my life, because I wasn't even living on campus at the time, but I had an apartment, and then I moved from my apartment to a dorm room. And as soon as I moved to my dorm room, that's when we had the winter storm, and it basically froze over the pipes. We didn't have any access to water. We used to have to get everything from bottled waters, and we would have to shower outside, use porta potties and stuff outside, and basically overcoming that gave me just the testament of that I am a child of God, because a lot of people went home. A lot of people didn't even come back to Jackson State. And again, I was by myself. Like, I didn't have people I could call on in Mississippi to just be like, oh, I need help, or can I stay with you and stuff like that. Like, it really was every man for themselves. So knowing that and going through that, and people also knowing that went to the school, it kind of went hand in hand, and a lot of people supported just the idea behind it and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of how I came up. Not even kind of, that's how I came up with God's Child.
Got you. You mentioning that season in your life put you in a position of realizing that you couldn't lean on anybody else. I feel like that's a significant thing to like hone in on, because I think that God intentionally puts us in situations
for sure
like that. So I do want to ask, like, I'd imagine like that season in your life wasn't easy, right? But like during that time, like, what was your attitude initially? Like
going through it?
Yeah, like spiritually and emotionally, like what was that experience like for you before it became a triumphant revelation of, okay, boom, like I got a revelation of how I can use this, you know?
I think for me at the time, I kind of was just going through the motions. I wasn't even necessarily sad. I kind of was just determined, because I was transitioning from living in the apartment that I was in to moving onto campus, because I was trying to get out that apartment. I think once I moved out that apartment and lived on campus in my own room, I kind of felt a little more free, because it was like, all right, I'm really by myself now. Because I had a roommate, but you know, we had altercations and stuff like that, and that really is why it led me to moving on campus. And once I was on campus, when we did go through the winter storm, I wasn't really I don't think I was really fazed by it. It was a lot, but to me it was better than being home at the time, because being at home was just a lot. So I think for me it was just kind of me, putting my chin up and being like, I'm gonna be all right. Like, I call my dad all the time. I call my mom all the time. It's like, you gonna be all right. Like, they really is the reason why I kind of remain steadfast and confident that everything will be okay.
For sure.
So yeah.
Would you say those relationships and that attitude is something that you've always had?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think for me, I get a knack out of being I get a kick out of being in hard circumstances. All my life I grew up being in facing different odds, growing up in a single parent household,
for sure,
not having access to a lot of money like other people do, and not being able to afford a lot of stuff that other people were able to afford. So I think I always just have a natural chip on my shoulder when I overcome stuff, because it's nothing new. It's familiar. And I think with that, I'm always comfortable in those situations, so it doesn't really faze me. Now sometimes it'll be times where I do kind of get low, and I'll be like, dang, like I don't know how I'm gonna get out of it, but for the most part, I'm kind of like, I'm good, like I'm gonna be fine, because I think I have to do that
for sure. Like, how intentional though has that perspective been in being rooted in your relationship with God?
It's definitely intentional, because at the end of the day, it's always going to be somebody going through something way worse than you.
For sure.
And although I know sometimes people allow that to take away from how they actually feel, I don't allow that to take away from how I actually feel, but I allow it to give me understanding that it's definitely something that I'll be able to get through. So, because it's people that going through a lot of stuff 10 times worse than I'm going through.
For sure.
That can't get out of where they at, because they have way more circumstances that are keeping them where they at. So I think I always keep that in mind when I'm going through anything. I don't even know if that answered your question.
No, for sure. I just wanted to connect that into how our development as an artist comes from us developing as an individual first, right? Like, we're people before we're artists, right? Like,
that's the root of every artist, is
exactly
what they going through in their life and they circumstances. That's how people relate to different artists, and that's how people become a fan or a supporter.
For sure. And it's for sure, and it's always the hardships and the experiences that we have,
for sure,
that may have not been enjoyable, that we remember most, and I feel shape us the most. And I feel God is, again, intentional about putting us in those type of situations and positions.
It's hard
to help us grow. For sure.
Definitely necessary.
For sure. So when you created the God's Child brand, was it just the extension of your music? Like, did you view it as an extension of your music? Because as artists, like, right, we're naturally going to have merch and other ways in which we present our brand in front of people, right? But me personally, I view your brand as more than just merch. Yeah. And I really respect too how the brand itself has developed over the years, and you've presented it in a way in which it's still its own brand. Yeah. Like, was that intentional?
It wasn't intentional at first.
Yeah.
I remember mentioning on Patrick's podcast that,
for sure,
originally, like I said, God's Child was supposed to be an album. And
right.
I knew if you're going to make an album, you got to have merch for it. So I wanted to make merch for the album that was going to be called God's Child.
Right.
But then once I went through what I went through,
right,
and people was buying into what I was doing, it kind of just made an identity of its own.
Exactly.
So it was really a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's kind of how it transformed itself into just being its own entity.
Got you. So, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because for the people who don't know, God's Child was originally a title for an album. Yeah. Right?
It's going to be like 10 tracks.
Exactly.
Have, of course, the title track and stuff like that. That's how I came up with the single God's Child. But I think I ended up scraping it just because it was so much going on at that time.
Got you.
So, yeah. Because, well, I came up with the concept of God's Child in 2021, and then I didn't even release the brand until 2022. So,
yeah.
It's funny how stuff
that's
just
how
take
God
time.
Be, too. Yeah. Like, he'll plant the seed. And it's like, it's not for right now to bloom, but
it took a whole year from me developing the concept of God's Child to me actually making the brand and going forward with it. So yeah.
What was that development process?
Well,
like, why did it take the time that it took from the idea being planted to it being brought to fruition?
Got you. For me, I was transitioning into my sophomore year. So my sophomore year, I had got COVID, and I still had the concept of God's Child. But with me having COVID, that was the worst I've ever been in my life as far as being sick. So I was restricted into these dorms that they had us in for like 2 weeks. That was back when you had to be
isolation
for 2 weeks. And I would be on TikTok, and on TikTok I would always just look up videos on how to start a brand, how to get a logo, what to do, who to call as far as manufacturers and stuff like that. And shout out to Hollywood Shaq, because he's like what they call he's like clothing brand Jesus. I know there ain't nobody Jesus, but like he's like clothing brand Jesus when it comes to putting people on a free game. So I used to watch his videos every day, and that was back when he was a lot smaller. Yeah. And I learned so much from him, and then based on what he was teaching about how to get a logo and stuff like that, I took that advice, got me a logo. By the time I got out of COVID, I had bought the logo, and then by the time we was getting out of the spring semester, that's when I finally bought shirts, and then I sold my first drop. So yeah, it definitely was it was quite the process. Like I said, it took about a year, but it was worth it though.
For sure. So knowing where your brand started, right? The shirt that you have on now is an example.
Yeah, it's an old drop.
You've dropped different colorways with the logo on the shirts. But recently, you've done a Juneteenth drop. Yeah. That looks very different from what you've been dropping. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about as far as your brand being developed in a more intentional way? Because that's artist development too, and I respect the fact too that you decided to do something different, because you could have just kept dropping different colors, right? And I'm sure at some point you probably still will, right?
Yeah,
like
for sure,
the classic, t-shirt, like that's always going to be a part of your brand. But yeah, like how did that intentionality come about, and why was it important for you to be as intentional as you were with your most recent drop?
Got you. Well, for one, I've been wanting to do a Juneteenth drop, because I feel like us celebrating Juneteenth as opposed to the 4th of July is really important, because a lot of people don't know why we celebrate Juneteenth and the purpose behind it. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, they always say in order to get sales, and really for me it isn't even about the sales, but to get people to engage with what you're making, you have to educate them. Exactly. And I really wanted to educate a lot of people about the importance of Juneteenth. And then also with, like you saying, why intention is important is because for me, like you said, for a long time I was just making colors and not really knowing what I was going to do next. I was like, well, should I do this next? Should I do this next? And kind of like what I said on the other podcast, a girl had came up to me at the party, and she was just like, I like your stuff, but I just wish you would be more intentional about how you approach what you're doing, because it's gonna be at some point it's gonna stop people from being like, why am I buying this? What is the purpose of me buying this? So from that point, I kind of was like, well, I need to have a reason why I'm doing this. So that's why I kind of spaced out my drops and stopped being like, well, I'm gonna just do this next month and do this at this time. So yeah,
for sure. Just hearing you explain that makes me think of two things. One, this is the Keys and Seeds podcast, right? So old keys can't open new doors. Yeah. Right?
For sure.
But also two, the fact that you even had someone comfortable enough to approach you and tell you what you should do, or make a suggestion of what you should do, for sure, with your brand. And the fact that you also took heed to that, right? Like, I think a lot of times too, one, of course, like as believers, humility is important. But also two, I do believe that God uses us in different ways. For sure. Like, did you appreciate in that moment that someone approached you and said like, hey, you should do this with your brand, or like, how did you navigate that?
I definitely appreciate it, because we was at a party, like we drunk as hell, to be transparent. Like that was at the time when I was drinking and smoking a lot. Like I was toe up. For her to be toe up and tell me that in the middle of a party, mind you, the music loud than a mug. So like once she told me that, I was like Okay, like I kind of it just stuck with me because it's just like you told me this in the midst of you kind of just being out your element, so I knew it had to be burning in you to say that to me. So after I kind of just got my mind cleared, I was like, she's very right. She's definitely this is definitely important. And when I watch different videos on people telling people to start up their brands and stuff like that, it's an overarching theme about purpose and intention. So
for sure,
I definitely learned a lot from that experience.
For sure. Definitely waiting and looking forward to my personal Juneteenth shirt coming in the mail.
I fixed the shirts too because I don't like the little bacon neck how to stick out. So I had them kind of like tighten it a little bit because that's annoying. So, got you. You're going to love it.
Got you. So I do kind of want to segue that into how you're still an artist first, right? On
it's funny
campus,
you say that because I be feeling like I'm a brand on the first now, which is funny.
I was definitely about to ask you too because it's like I know for me right now, like showing up for the pod, right? Like naturally, like people know me more for my music, right? But I'm reintroducing myself as someone who's more than just a music artist, right? I imagine it being different for you to navigate through being on a college campus, right? Like you guys are constantly wearing multiple different hats and introducing yourself to people in different ways, right? Like
for sure
on college campuses, right? Like there's going to be some people who know you for one thing, there's going to be some other people who know you from a different organization, right?
Definitely.
How do you navigate both your brand as a CEO, right, with the clothing, but also as a artist too? Like, is there one that's more of your passion or focus, or how does that balance both?
I think for me, even as a child, when I was a child, I used to always... It's funny because that's why I always say it parallels. When I was a child, I used to always tell myself I wanted to wear my own stuff. I wanted to have my own clothes to wear. Like I've said this since I was a child. When I was younger, I used to write on a paper in cursive my middle name. I used to write my middle name Dierre, and I used to always tell myself if I become a rapper, I name myself Dierre. So it was like little seeds I would plant when I was younger because I knew what I wanted to do unintentionally. And once I got into college, me owning my brand kind of overtook my music because a lot of people didn't know I made music until I joined the organization that I was in, Outspoken.
And that's what I wanted to get to,
that's how people knew that I was an artist. So people found out I was an artist after the fact in Jackson.
Because you said you took a break. But I know you've been doing music since before you got to college.
Exactly. So that's why it's always different hats I got to flip, because when I'm back home, people know me as the artist. When I come back home, people like, when the next drop? And I'm like, shoot, I'm worried about I'm worried about what next drop. I'm going to drop my clothes. Like, so I'm always balancing like two different things.
Yeah, for sure. Every time I get on the gram, it's new drop.
Yeah.
I'm like, it ain't no music though. But
that's funny.
But you recently have dropped some new music.
Yeah.
You dropped the EP. Tell us a little bit about that. How'd that come about?
Well, I had music that I was making in the hiatus that I was in.
Yeah.
And shout out to my homeboy London. He was my roommate. Was it my junior year of college? And he's a producer. Yeah. And like I said, I was taking a hiatus, so he would always ask me, "You want to record something?" I used to be like, "Nah, I'm cool." But he kind of got me back out of my shell of making music, and
we need people like that too.
Yes, I definitely told him I appreciate him a lot, and just kind of getting me out of my shell and really loving music again, because he's so talented. He can sing, produce, rap, like he literally can do everything. And he produced Are You Down? He produced Kane Baby. And he produced Are You Down and Kane Baby. And I had those songs, and then I had another track, the Fully Loaded joint. I had wrote that and had my homeboy Aura produce that. So they're just a culmination of different songs that I made that I was comfortable with sharing, that also was on theme for what the whole project was about, which was about me leading into coming to Jackson State.
Right.
Which was something a lot of people didn't know, especially at my school. A lot of people didn't know how I got to Jackson State and why I ended up being there and why I wanted to go there. So, yeah.
For sure. Could you share a little bit about why?
Oh, why? Oh,
For
yeah.
those who don't know.
For those who don't know, like, prior to me coming to Jackson State, I just was involved in a lot of stuff I shouldn't have been involved in. You know, you hang around the wrong company and you put yourself in situations that kind of endanger your life. You kind of, it's either fight or flight, and I didn't feel comfortable staying at home. So I knew college was a route that I could take, and I feel like that was a more important route for me to take. Because originally I was doing trade school, but that didn't really go the way I wanted to. So I was like, I'm gonna just go to school. And I wanted to go to a HBCU, but I didn't want to go anywhere around this the state, because it was still people that was from here that went there. So I had looked up. Well, my homeboy was going to Jackson State, so I looked up Jackson State and its majors. Oof, you mean? They had a journalism major or journalism degree, and I was like, I'm gonna go there. It kind of was spontaneous, and I saw that they had the band and a bunch of different stuff that I digged, and I kind of just went for it and went there. So,
Got you. So, what's your most recent project, farthest that you dropped? I know that you also got some new on the way.
Yeah.
But also too, because I've known you for as long as I've known you, I can say that I've heard and I've witnessed your sound grow and evolve. How would you say that growth and development came about?
For me,
like, was it intentional with that break that you took when you went off to college, or how would you say your sound has grown and evolved?
Well, I think when I first was making music and getting into the groove of how to make a song and be an artist and stuff like that, I kind of was just learning as I went. Early on, I kind of was mimicking other artists that I heard. I don't think I really got into my own sound until I made my Always EP. I feel like my Always EP was the first instance of me kind of having my own approach to making music and stuff like that, because you could tell it was very experimental and it was more of myself as opposed to me kind of wanting to sound like an artist. And then with me taking a hiatus and getting to Mississippi and being a sponge for the different artists that I was around within the org that I was saying, Outspoken, a lot of them are very different artists and they come from different places, and just kind of being around them gave me a lot of inspiration in how I should approach a song and really testing my limits, honestly. I talk to my homeboy Dierre almost every day about how I should go about making a song and how it should be formatted and stuff like that, because I really respect him as an artist, and not even just him, but people like Corey and Macalays and everybody in SBF. So I think a lot of my almost got myself. A lot of my development came from me being around people that I respect as artists and stuff like that. Well, I almost pulled the what they call that, the Tom and Jerry, that dogs. Boy, it's funny as hell. Like, get it out, boy. But yeah, me being around a lot of different artists and kind of seeing them and their process and how they approach music really helped a lot. Especially Corey, because Corey is, I call him like Kobe Bryant, bro. He will literally be up at like 3 a.m. making music.
Don't get me started.
He's a madman.
He knows I'm a fan.
So hearing him, seeing his work ethic, and being around, like I said, other creatives and seeing how they work, it really is inspiring. It kind of makes me want to go harder and do a lot more for my artistry, and that's kind of how I came about developing and making my new project, because people have been begging for me to make an album, so I'm finally taking the steps into doing it. So.
Got you. I'm happy that you mentioned too that a lot of that development comes from being inspired by others. One, because a lot of people be too prideful to admit that they're inspired by other people. But also, too, that made me think about how I want to talk about how, with you being connected to two different scenes, right? Like being here in Indy, but also being in Jackson, where you are. Like, how have those two respectively and uniquely inspired you in your development as an artist?
Well, for me, I kind of felt, I'm not gonna say dumb, but I kind of felt ignorant to the fact of Jackson having a music scene. A lot of people don't know the blues comes from Mississippi, and it kind of reflects in the artist sounds. A lot of the artists that are in Mississippi, the music that they make is very, I mean, of course it's soulful, but beyond that, it's very emotional, it's very vulnerable. And hearing those different elements when it comes to just the music that they make, it kind of helped me with being more, again, like vulnerable and being more expressive about my emotions, expressive about the stuff that I went through. So being in the space in Mississippi, it helped with that part. And then me being in India, I think it helped a lot with just it helped a lot with me kind of hearing different sounds, because like I said, we in the Midwest, there's so many different sounds that we gravitate to and towards. And me kind of adapting with that. So I think I take those different things when it comes to how I approach my music and the different sounds and stuff like that.
Got you. You saying how where you're at school being the influence that it's been on your music, one is important because as artists, right, like we're expressing who we are. The audience can't connect with the music if they can't connect with who you are, right? And I think there's a lot of artists who are presenting like masks, right? And they aren't truly being authentic in their music. So I think that's great that you have that influence on your art. But I've always heard that in your art. You've always been just very true to who you are. Too, like as you've been growing and, you know, developing as a person too. But how would you say with indie specifically, like where would you say you fit in within the scene here? Because like you said, it is a lot of different sounds, but I think too, like the artists here are all very authentic to their sound.
I think for me, well, you ain't gonna hate me when I say this. I didn't think that I fit in to the scene. Like, just off the fact that, like I said, when I came in, it was a different sound being pushed as far as just, but I think a lot of that had to do with the people I was hanging around. Like, everybody that I hung around, they listened to a lot of the street music. Which, like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. But that kind of clouded my judgment about, well, is the music that I'm making not necessarily authentic, but is it worthy of people listening to it and appreciating it? Am I wasting my time talking about these things? And it was a point in time where I felt like I had to mold my sound into what other people were listening to and try to mesh those different worlds. And I think gradually as time went on, I kind of stopped caring about that and kind of just embraced the fact that I make different music than what other people listen to and what the masses be wanting, and kind of honing that and accepting it. And that kind of allowed me to be more comfortable in how I approach my music and testing different stuff. So it definitely was it took a long time for me to find my identity, and I'm still kind of finding it when it comes to being in indie, because I'm not here all the time. So when I'm home, when people be like, oh my gosh, like it's so good to see you perform, or oh my gosh, when is this drop, it kind of still takes me back, because I'm like, I thought y'all forgot I existed type. Like, it's kind of weird.
Sorry. Would you say that that's something that you also struggle with just as a person? Like, as you speak to finding your identity as an artist and like finding your place within the scene, do you think that that's a reflection of, like, do you also wrestle with that just as a person and finding your place in the world?
I think as a person,
because our artistry obviously is a reflection of who we are, right?
Sure.
And I know I asked you that because although I had that struggle with my artistry, that's something that I also wrestle with just as a person, just my identity and where exactly I fit.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's always a constant tug and pull.
Yeah.
More or less now, I don't have that struggle anymore. I think I'm kind of confident in who I am, confident in what I can do. And again, it wasn't overnight.
Yeah.
It kind of developed over time. So now I'm more comfortable about who I am and what I do. But back then, it definitely was just the tug and pull because I thought success was just my idea of success and what that came with and what I had to do to get that just was very flawed and in the approach and the ideology behind that. But like I said, over time, just kind of understanding that the more authentic that you are, the more success that you'll get in whatever realm that God intends for you. Because it's like you could do all this to mess yourself into doing what other people want for you, but if you're not doing what God intends for you, it don't really matter. So I stopped caring about what other people think and what other people wanted from me, and just started doing not only what He wants, but what I'm comfortable with doing myself. So it definitely was a battle.
And I'm glad you made that point because the type of conversations that I had on the pod, right? Like we all have our own relationship with God, right? And I just think that where I'm at personally with the pod, I'm just more expressive of where I am in my relationship with God, right?
Yeah.
But because you brought it up, is there a specific like moment in time or like event or experience that you went through? Like what was that? How did that revelation come about for you? Because I know how it came about for me, but for you, like how did you come to that place of realizing that it's about God's will for your life and not your own? Because we kind of talked about it off mic, right? But for the people who don't know,
I think that revelation came like my fall semester of last year.
Yeah.
Just everything that I went through. I won't get into details, but just everything I went through had a lot to do with public perception, how people perceive me, and a lot of it was just me being in my head.
Yeah.
Me hearing one thing and thinking that it's the reality of everything, but the whole time it's not really the reality of it. I was too caught up in what other people thought of me, what other people think of me, what the public think of me, and the whole time none of that matters because at the end of the day, whatever God thinks of me is just what ultimately matters. And then also just living in my truth. Like the person I was, the person I was a couple months back, I was wrestling with my own truth. I wasn't living in my truth. I wasn't honest about who I was as a person. I wasn't honest about the things that I was doing behind closed doors that people don't see. And once I started living in my truth a lot more, being honest about the stuff that I go through, the things that I'm dealing with, and the stuff that I'm battling, I got more comfortable in being who I was as a person. And that's kind of how I got more confident in just being sure of myself and what I do and how I approach just going through life every day. So
For sure. Speaking back on the fact that you said it's a tug and pull, how much of that do you think that still is for you?
It's not as bad as it used to be no more. I think a lot more times now I'm a lot more confident and sure of myself because I no longer rely on my own thinking or my own understanding. But everybody got their days sometimes, so I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh, everything is just rain and sunshine and stuff. I hate when people try to play that facade. Like there's days where it's hard, there's nights where it's hard, but overall I think it said pray without ceasing. So I just constantly just in a state of prayer and just meditating on the word and just being, like I said, living in my truth every day.
For sure. So, is there something specific you've been meditating on recently or currently?
As far as what, like?
The word.
Like a specific word? Or like just like...
Or what would you say is like a foundational scripture? Or like your favorite scripture that like you often find yourself going back to?
Well, my favorite scripture that kind of got me through everything that I went through in the fall was Exodus 14:14. You know, like the Lord will fight for you. All you have to do is be still. I was so combative. I was so angry and prideful about how I should approach things. I was always wanting to be like, well, I'm gonna do this because they're doing this to me, or they gotta see me basically ishing on them. Like I was real big on proving a point, and the whole time I didn't need to do all that. Like he'll handle everything. You know, vengeance is mine. I used to think vengeance is mine. It's like, no, it's mine, but no, it's his. It's his vengeance. And it's not always like what people think it is. It's not always people necessarily going through a hardship. It's really just people having to live in their truth. Because the older I get, and the more I go through life, the more I realize people don't be living in their truth. People do not live in their truth. They're not honest about how they feel about themselves. They're not honest about how they feel about other people, and I wanted to stop doing that. Because I would put on a facade because I didn't want to hurt people's feelings and stuff like that, and I had to stop doing that. So,
For sure. That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good. That's so good. Because that's literally part of the purpose of this pod. Me showing up more in my truth. I've always shared it, of course, in my music, and we talked about it off mic. Me showing up for this pod has been something that has forced me to be in a position of just sharing even more, you know, of who I am, and speaking to your point of God's will versus our own, right? Like if it was up to me, I'd still be pursuing music, and not saying that I'm not still pursuing music, right?
It's not a priority, no.
Yeah, the priorities have shifted for me.
I'm the same way.
And it was intentionally done on God's end. And if it wasn't for me also going through hardships, also experiencing the fact that I had to allow God to vindicate me, right? I probably would have still been in the same position. And so I believe we all have to go through experiences like that. And as a friend, I know what those experiences were, and I know you aren't ready to speak on it yet, but hopefully a part 2, you know, come soon, because I believe that would be edifying for people.
For sure.
And your testimony is definitely powerful.
Thank you.
It's powerful. Even though your name is Dierre, we know your full name.
Yeah.
God knows your name. And
I used to hate my first name. I embrace it now. I love my name.
So for the people who don't know, Dierre is your middle name.
Yeah.
And your first name is
Jeremiah.
Every
time people hear that, they be like,
you know.
You be name fishing? I'm like, nah.
God's child.
It's not that I'm ashamed to tell or address myself as my first name.
But Dierre is still your name though. And that's different.
Yeah.
I know more people named Jeremiah than I know Dierre. You're the only Dierre.
That and it's my artist name. It's a name that I identify myself or whatever my brand is. And for me, I like for my actual name, my first name, to just kind of be exclusive to people that really know me for real. So that's why I don't be like, oh, I'm Jeremiah. They be like, when people sometimes the people that are in school that call me that, I be like, I don't know you like that.
For sure.
It kind of be weird. So yeah.
For sure. And that's kind of how I feel with Kendall in my actual name. Yeah. Right,
But I'm like, that's more similar though.
Yeah, Kendall is not part of my actual name, but we see in the Bible the fact that people got renamed.
Yeah. And the names have different meanings too.
Exactly.
I had just learned, I'm not going to, because I don't remember exactly what it means, so I'm not going to speak out of turn, but I learned that the fact that Judas has 2 different names, some dude was explaining that it was a reason to that. His first and his other name is significant as to why he's named that. So yeah.
Because then too, you see in the Bible, a lot of people had the same names too. And I remember seeing somebody question why all these people have the same name? I'm like, the same way we all got the same names out here. But yeah.
So many Maries.
Yeah.
Maries and Nicoles.
Man, I'm so glad Mom did not do that for me. But and both of our middle names start with D. That's crazy. But so I think the last question I have for you is, as an artist, and as we're speaking on artist development, how would you say your taste in music has changed? And like just casually listening as an artist, I mean as a fan of music, but also too as an artist, because you mentioned yourself that you draw inspiration, whether intentionally or not, from other artists, right? How has that development been for you? Because I know how it's been for me, just knowing that I can't just casually listen to certain music anymore.
Yeah, definitely not.
But also too, like, as an artist, I'm also super aware of the fact that a lot of artists themselves aren't developing. Yeah. And you can tell in their music and what they're releasing.
For sure.
So, how do you navigate that?
For me, like, full transparency, when I listen to music now, I be like gospel down. Like, I don't listen to nothing but gospel.
Yeah.
And when people hear me say that, they be thinking I'm like playing. I literally only listen to gospel now.
Yeah.
Well, it's not only. I mainly just listen to gospel. But prior to that, I think me not listening to the genre of hip hop really helped for my development as far as an artist. I never forget, shout out to Baby Ebony. He used to always be like, I don't listen to hip hop. I don't listen to all that other stuff that be in the mainstream and stuff like that, because it's going to naturally affect the music I make.
Yeah.
And when he told me that at the time, I didn't think nothing of it, because I'm like, man, you tripping. I'm still going to be listening to whatever. And I see why he say that.
It's now. A whole world of sounds.
Yeah. I see why he said that now. I for the most part, like I like a lot of R&B because it just kind of mellows me out. And then I like traditional rap. I like a lot of different genres and subgenres of rap. It just depends on my mood and how I'm feeling.
Gotcha.
But I'm definitely mainly like an R&B type of person, because I just like the sound, and the sound is behind it is very soothing and pleasing to the ear for sure.
Gotcha. I know you mentioned that you mostly listen to gospel, but also just speaking to artist development. Are there any specific artists that you've been able to grow with throughout the years?
That's beyond, well, just in general?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Of course, Kendrick. That's my favorite artist of all time. Somebody that's more, it's a lot of artists for sure. I just was watching the Sylvia demo. I had been watching it, but I had finished the video. But I watched the 10-year anniversary, the basically the tiny desk that he did on Spotify, and I low-key was kind of crying because I'm like,
I was going to see him in Cincy.
Yeah, I was jealous. I was very jealous. Like hearing Isaiah Rashad, Westside Boogie, Schoolboy Q. There's so many artists I could go through as far as like growing with and listening to and really knowing their discography and hearing them over time. But I say all that to say, like, it really is helping me trying to navigate how to really grow as an artist and really develop truly, especially with Kendrick. For him to make an album like Mr. Morale speaks a lot to him really living in his truth. To go on record and admit the fact that you cheated on your wife, that you had different addictions that affected your relationship, not only with just your wife but other people around you. That take a lot, bro. And I see why he moved the way he moved now. Cause it's like there's nothing that anybody can really take away from him now, because he's already told you, like, admitted everything that he's done.
That's a good point. That ties into what you just said. So I think the ending point would be, what would you say is the message that you want to continuously put in your music? How would you want the people who are tuned into you now, coming along at different points in your journey, how would you want them to grow with you as an artist? How is your artist development been connected to your growth just as an individual? Speaking to the hardships and things that you've overcome.
I think for me, I probably just say, well, I mentioned it before, but like living in your truth, but beyond that, just understanding that everybody human.
Yeah.
As much as I've developed so much, I had times where it wasn't clicking for me why people act the way that they do and why people do certain things, and I really had to learn that everybody is on their own journey as far as growing as people, and you have to give people grace and mercy. Like it's easy to get mad at people for doing what they do. It's easy to get mad at other people for doing things to you that you didn't necessarily like or you felt was wrong. But at the end of the day, you got to take accountability for how you're going to react to it and what you're going to do to move forward, you know?
For sure.
Before we wrestle not against flesh and blood, you feel me? So I kind of that was what I wanted. That was the scripture that really stuck with me. Just knowing that and understanding why people act the way that they do and how people are influenced every day by things that's not necessarily themselves. So I guess I would just close with, as far as my music for the future is just a testament to me learning that people are gonna be human. You have to trust people to be human, not trust people to do you wrong, you know? So that's probably the biggest thing I take from just the music that I make now. It's a lot more expressive in how I feel, but also just how I've grown and how I've changed my thinking and forgiving people on the way. So
yeah. And listening to your music, I can hear that, and I would hope too that for anyone listening to your music, that they also get that from you. Living your truth.
Definitely.
I think that's the overarching theme and message.
You have to.
And we live in our truth right now. Peeling back those layers of what's mentioned and talked about in our music. So is there anything else you want to add or give?
Well, I will say thank you for having me. First off, thank you for having me. 2, I do got a project that I'm working on, Dirty. It's going to be dropping in the fall. Hopefully, not hopefully, but prayerfully November it'll drop. I'm really excited for it.
I'm excited for you. I got a little exclusive.
Yeah, I was about to say, you heard it before a lot of people, so definitely. And I'm still working on it, so by the time it's out, I'm just really hoping that the work that I put in for people to really take their time to really delve into it and, you know, give my perspective on what I've been going through these last couple months. So,
For sure. Well, thank you for your time. Again, whenever you're ready for a part 2, I'd love to just even have a follow-up conversation about that project.
For sure.
Because it's...
I'll be home after. Yeah, I'll be home after the drop. So
yeah, because that project is an ode to the environment that you're in now.
For sure.
And I love that because although people know you here in Indy, right? You also have a whole other group of people who know you out there, and both of those environments are equally important to your growth and development. So
for sure.
I'm excited to hear it before. I'm excited to have a conversation about it. And I'm grateful for this conversation being the conversation that it was. Let the people know where they can find you. Anything else you want to plug or let them know about?
You can follow me on like everything as far as Instagram, Twitter, I'm not calling it X, TikTok, and YouTube. You can follow me on my socials at KXNGDIERRE. And then as far as on the music platform, you can find me at KINGDIERRE. So yeah.
Alright, is that it?
Yeah.
Thank you guys for tuning in for another episode. This is King Dierre, or just Dierre. See you guys in the next one. Bye.
And now we just laughing, really was crying, riding in traffic, thinking we dying. Like fuck what they saying, I come from the ghetto with Kobe and Mello, we name it a Glock. Roll through the city, ain't looking for pity, cause soon as you win, they make you a hop, I done seen it. Like bro, you the meanest, really a demon, waiting for time, thinking we beefing.